This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, I'm Harvey Micel. This presentation is for those who need or will need a kidney transplant. It's also for family members and friends who want to help someone in need. I refer to them as advocates. Advocates are often the one to make the donor aware of the recipient's need. The more advocates you have, the more likely it is that your donor will find you. This title, Having Your Donor Find You, may seem strange. Most people think you need to ask someone to donate. I've spoken to hundreds of donors and have inquired, how did your recipient ask you to donate? What I usually hear is, no one asked me to donate. I heard about their situation and I wanted to learn more. There are good people in the world, and I believe that your donor is out there. They just don't know about your situation or are not educated enough about living kidney donation. A successful kidney campaign is all about telling your story and having others share your story. The more people hear about your situation is the way that your donor will find you. I'm a two-time kidney transplant recipient and started the Living Kidney Donors Network in 2007 after my first kidney transplant, which was as a result of PKD, polycystic kidney disease. It's a genetic condition. I was fortunate that my wife was able to be my donor. The transplant was in February of 2007. We both recovered quickly, and I realized that from what I learned, I could help others to a successful living kidney transplant experience. About a year and a half after my transplant, I developed a rare condition called the BK virus. As with most viruses, like the common cold, there's no treatment for the BK virus. As time went by, my kidney function declined, and in January 2012, I was told that I needed another kidney transplant. After 5 years of helping others develop their own kidney campaign, it seemed a bit ironic that now I had to take my own advice. I'll provide you with more information about my second transplant a bit later in this presentation. For those of you who are not familiar with the Living Kidney Donors Network, our primary mission is to help people who need a kidney transplant become successful at pursuing a living kidney donor. So let's get started. This disclaimer that's here is for the presentation. It should be used as a resource only, and it's not intended to be used as medical advice. So knowledge definitely builds confidence. In fact, in the business world, they say knowledge is power. Well, here it gives you the power to talk about your situation, to tell people about your situation, and to tell them your story. So learn as much as you can about living kidney donation and certainly your own medical condition so you can convey that to other people. It'll be a lot easier the more you learn. These are myths or misconceptions that people have. Maybe it's some that you might have about the process. And you can use some of these myths, as I'll talk a little bit later, when you start emailing people and just educating them about your situation. Many people think they have two kidneys because one is a spare, but it's unusual for only one kidney to be affected with a condition. My condition, PKD, polycystic kidney disease, affected both kidneys. The two leading causes of kidney failure are diabetes and high blood pressure, hypertension. And in those situations, both kidneys are affected. So it's a little unusual for only one to be affected with a kidney ailment. People think they need two kidneys to have a normal life. Something you may not know is that 1 in 750 people are born with one kidney, and their life expectancy is the same as someone born with two. Some women think they can't have children. They can't have children after they donate. And for some reason, people think that the donors take anti-rejection drugs. The donors don't. It's the recipients that do. Over the past few years, they've made great advancements both for both recipients and donors that are 60 or 65, even 70 years old. So it's really not your age. It is someone's health. And many people think that matching is difficult, like 1 in a million. But as you heard, my wife donated to me, and she's not a blood relative. You don't need a blood relative anymore. The drugs that we take overcomes many of the matching issues that are there. There are compatibility issues, and we'll discuss that a little later. Some people think that you can't donate if you have a tattoo or if you smoke marijuana. Those are not things that typically will preclude someone from being a donor. So the waiting list is quite large, over 100,000 people waiting for organs. Most are waiting for kidneys. And that is really the problem in terms of why there's such a waiting list. But the 95,000 people waiting is just a low number in terms of how many people need a kidney transplant, because you've got over 500,000 people on kidney dialysis, and obviously all of them need a kidney transplant. I won't talk much about the waiting list, but it is very long, and regional areas have longer or shorter waiting lists. So if the waiting list is a good option for you, then you should or could consider getting registered somewhere else. The only limitation you have to register somewhere else is whether your insurance will cover you, and the distance being traveling might be expensive. So the reason why there are different wait times is because there are localized, what they call OPOs, organ procurement organizations. There are 58 of them nationally. And so what happens, you are in one OPO, and the waiting list may be longer. For example, in New York and California, they have longer waiting lists than most of the other country. But if you go to another OPO, perfectly legal to do that, that has a shorter waiting list, you can register there and find one that has a shorter waiting list. And the reason why you need to register somewhere else, it's a national list, but organs are distributed first locally within a local area. Then if there isn't a match, that OPO area. If there isn't a match, they go regional. If there isn't a match, they go national. Because of the shortage, most organs are distributed, and kidneys are distributed locally to that OPO. So that's why there may be a shorter waiting list in another area. There are about 24,000 kidney transplants every year. Many people think that there are more living kidney transplants. There aren't. There are about 17,000 deceased donor transplants, and about 7,000 living kidney transplants. Recently, in recent years, there have been more deceased donor transplants, and the reason for that is mostly because of drug overdoses. Those organs are good organs to use. The kidneys are good kidneys to use. So the number of overdose deaths has just doubled in the last 10 years. And another reason that there's been an increase is they're starting to use hepatitis C organs, where in the past they wouldn't use those. And the reason why they're using them is it's possible to transfer that condition to the person that receives a hep C organ. But hep C is curable now. So many people, if they do get hep C, there are drugs to cure it. So that's the reason that there have been more deceased donor transplants. There have also been more living donor transplants, and that is mostly as a result of paired exchanges. And we'll talk about paired exchanges and what they do in terms of increasing the number of transplants that are out there. The term match or matching is kind of misused. I prefer to use the term suitable or the terms suitable and compatible. Suitable being someone is healthy enough to donate, and compatible meaning that they can donate to their intended recipient that is there. So I'm going to talk about two important blood tests that you being the person in need that will take. The first is called a PRA, or panel reactive antibodies. The term here is to understand is antibodies. So it's a blood test taken on those in need, and they're checking to see the level of the antibodies that are in your blood. If you have a high level of antibodies, it becomes harder to find a compatible donor. These antibodies will develop in one of three ways. If you've had a previous transplant, or if you've had a blood transfusion, these antibodies will be increased. And for some women, not all, giving birth will increase these antibodies. So just to give you an example, let's say your PRA is 20. What that means is 20% of the population won't be able to donate to you. That if you accepted that organ, you would immediately reject it or reject the organ. So the PRAs they're measured 0 to 100. And there's a term used that if you have a high level, let's say above 80 of antibodies in your blood, they call that being highly sensitized. There are some people that are sensitized to 90, 95, or even 100%. At that high level, it becomes more difficult, but there are things that can be done to lower those antibodies in an individual that is there. Another important blood test is called the cross match. That's where they mix the donor and the recipient's blood. You're looking for a negative cross match. If it's positive, you would be rejecting that kidney, and they would not let the transplant go through. Often the cross match is done early in the evaluation process by someone, and then they'll do it again very close to when the transplant is going to occur. The typical use for the term match or matching are these antigens that need to be matched. But it's not as critical as it once was, because the drugs that the recipient takes overcomes this matching. Again, there are still compatibility issues. These antibodies are there. Another compatibility issue is blood type. You need to be blood type compatible with the person that is donating to you. To give you an idea of these antigen matches and the difference in terms of benefits of a living versus a deceased donor is this graph chart here. Now let's take a look at the second green bar that's there. What they do here is they combine in the first bar all of the matches between a 0 and a 5 antigen match. So the reason they do that is because there isn't a significant difference in the longevity of the organ. As you can see on a perfect match in the second one of a deceased donor, there is a significant difference between the longevity. When you start to look at the living donor, again, you'll see the benefits one of the benefits of a kidney from a living donor is the longevity versus one from a deceased donor. And of course, as you'll see, a perfectly matched kidney is one of significance for individuals in terms of longevity. So if you take a look at the first green and the first blue bar charts there, what is generally discussed in the industry is that a kidney from a living donor lasts about twice as long as one from a deceased donor. Here in this chart, it's 10 years versus almost 18 years. That's there. So let me talk a little bit about the living donor types of transplants. One is a related, obviously, a brother, sister, mother, father, cousin, and then non-related, in my instance, a spouse or a friend that's there. And what has occurred over the years is 15 years ago, about 3/4 of the transplants were from blood-related individuals. Now it's around 50%. Again, because it's not needed because of the drugs that we take. There is a type of transplant called a non-directed donor. Some people call them altruistic. I think all donors are altruistic, either directed or non-directed donor. But we'll talk about the power of these non-directed donors that come out and say, I want to donate, but I don't know anyone in need. So let's talk about paired exchanges for a second. Paired exchanges occur when you have someone that wants to donate to you, but is not compatible. Either these antibodies are there, or blood type, or there are some other matching issues that need to occur. Previous years, they would say to this person, thank you, and they would just go home or send them home. But now they can get involved in a paired exchange. Here's a simple two-way paired exchange where donor one is not able to donate to their recipient, and same with donor two. And they do a quick paired exchange. They also call them swaps. I've used a two-way paired exchange here. It could be a three-way, four-way, five-way paired exchange. There's really no limit. They've done a 50 paired exchange. There's another type of paired exchange. It's called a domino paired exchange or a closed paired exchange. The way that works is that you have on the top right there, you have that non-directed donor, someone who steps up and says, I don't know anyone that is in need of a transplant, but I want to donate a kidney. So in this case, if you have another donor, we take on another recipient, and they do the swapping. Donor 1 donates to recipient 2, donor 2 to recipient 3, and the non-directed donor to recipient 1. Again, I'm using an example of a 3-way paired exchange. It could be 4-way, 5-way, 6-way paired exchange. And this domino, or called a closed paired exchange, is closed because they took the extra recipient, and that recipient comes from the waiting list, and that person really does win the lottery. They get a call from the transplant center, and they say your transplant is scheduled for 2 weeks from now, and it's kind of confusing to them because they've been waiting for a deceased donor transplant, but no, they're told that they're going to get involved in a living donor transplant. So another type of paired exchanges is, they call this an open paired exchange, or an ongoing or never-ending paired exchange. What makes this different is the non-directed donor again starts it, but instead of bringing in someone from the waiting list, they have an extra donor here. Donor 2 in this example isn't needed in this paired exchange because of the non-directed donor. So the donor 2 donates next week or next month or when it's convenient, and he or she starts another chain, okay, plays the role of the non-directed donor. And at that paired exchange, there'll also be another extra donor. And that's why they call them never-ending or ongoing. In theory, they can go on forever. One non-directed donor, on average, saves 6 lives. So they really are very, very powerful in terms of what they do. I have a link here to an article about paired exchanges. I call it the paired exchange conundrum. And the conundrum is that if you have an incompatible donor, you want to be in a larger pool of incompatible pairs. Okay, there are many benefits you're looking for, but one of the biggest benefits is to be in a large pool. If there's a pool of, let's say, 20 incompatible donors, and there's another pool of, let's say, 100 incompatible donors, it's more likely you're going to be paired up in that other paired exchange, in that other donor pool. So it's very important for that. And this article explains the challenges that are there for you with a paired exchange, because there are 3 national programs, okay, paired exchange programs that are in the United States. They don't do transplants. Each of them is kind of like a co-op. They're technically not a co-op, but they operate like that. They go to transplant centers and they say, give us your list of incompatible pairs, and we will keep them together. There'll be a larger pool, and you'll do more paired exchanges, and your incompatible pair will more likely be paired up. So of these 3 organizations, one, called the National Kidney Registry, is doing more paired exchanges than the other 2, significantly more. They're doing more than 70% of all of the paired exchanges in the United States. They have many affiliates, almost 100 transplant centers are affiliated with them. And so it's my suggestion that if you have an incompatible pair, you should go ahead and look for a transplant center that is affiliated with the National Kidney Registry. So they provide many other benefits for the donor and the recipient also. They have an above average graft survival rates for the individuals, and they have something called protections or donor shield for the donor. That is, should the donor need a transplant in the future, one of the benefits of this donor shield, should they need a transplant in the future, they will be able to get a kidney from a living donor through the National Kidney Registry's pool. So there are many benefits to being involved with the National Kidney Registry, or finding a transplant center that is affiliated with that organization. So if you are in need of a transplant and you're looking for a donor, you can provide financial support for the individual that is donating. It's perfectly legal for you to reimburse them for any expenses that they have, travel expenses, food, lodging. You can also reimburse them for any lost wages. And you can raise money for this. I'm providing you with a couple of organizations that will help you raise money for the individual, but perfectly legal to pay for any of their expenses. It's not legal to pay them just to write a check for donating a kidney. So we've talked a little bit about kidney transplants. Let's talk more, or let's talk now about how you're going to find a donor, or as I say, have your donor find you, and the power really and the importance of communications. It's all about your story and getting your story out there. In fact, that's what our lives are all about, telling stories. You meet family members and friends, you tell them about a good movie you saw, or a bad movie, a good restaurant, an idea you have, a story about somebody else. Our lives are really all about stories, and this should be one of your stories that you're telling. And don't think of it as asking anyone to donate, okay? It's all about telling your story. If you are accurate and informative of telling your story, it's going to be obvious what your need is and what you're looking for. I'm often asked, who do I tell? You tell everyone, every day. Starbucks baristas donate kidneys. Cashiers at grocery stores donate kidneys. And you think about it for a second, how many people they see a day and how short a period of time they interact. Well, that person is getting their story out, obviously, to them, and it is touching them in some way. You need to keep your story short. Here's my story. If I sent this to you, you wouldn't read it. I wouldn't read it. I don't read it. People post things like this on our Facebook page, and I write to them. I say, I'm going to remove it. Please make it shorter because no one's going to read it. And my suggestion is to use bullets instead of long paragraphs. Just like in the business world, you'll use bullets to get a point across, or a proposal information that you're putting there. You want to do the same here. You want to make it easy on the eye for somebody to read what the information you have. I suggest putting together a flyer with this information, and use a photo. Use a photo of yourself. If you have children, include a photo of your children or grandchildren or even a pet. It's been shown that if you have some photo there, it's going to attract people a little bit more. I mentioned advocates a little earlier, that they're the one that are often making the donor-recipient connection. So I mentioned to you after my first transplant, I developed this virus, and 5 years after my transplant, I needed another kidney transplant. So I started taking my own advice. I was getting the word out, and one day I was on Facebook, and I saw someone posted an article about organ donation. And so I contacted her. She ended up living outside of Seattle. I'm in the Chicago area. So I asked her why she posted the story and if she had a connection to the transplant community. She said, no, I don't have a connection to the transplant community. I just thought it was an interesting story. So I told her my story, what I was doing now. I was in need of another kidney transplant, etc. I gave her a link to my website, and I thought that was about it. Well, it just so happened that Stephen, who ended up being my donor for my second transplant, happened to see the same story that this woman posted. Stephen lives outside of Detroit. So he contacted her because he had been thinking about donating for some time now, and he thought the time was right. So he started doing some searching. He saw the article. He contacted her. Maybe she could help him. She said, no, I really can't help you. But she told him about my organization and that I needed another kidney transplant. Stephen reached out to me, and Stephen and I were involved in a three-way paired exchange. This woman, who I didn't know very well, in fact, didn't know much at all, became my advocate. So advocates don't only need to be family members and friends. They can be anyone you meet that can help you spread the word. Advocates also see opportunities that you might not be able to. Maybe you're friendly with someone who's knowledgeable at social media or in the marketing world, or just can help get the word out. And they can help you navigate the system because getting a transplant is complicated. So the best advocate, you might have someone that gets evaluated for you, and they're told that they have a medical condition, that they're not able to donate. That person would be a wonderful advocate for you, because when they start to talk to someone, they can tell them about their friend or family member that's in need of a kidney transplant, and they can say to them, I wanted to donate to them, but I'm unable to. I have a medical condition that precludes me from doing so. So I'm often asked, who do I tell my story to? As I said, everyone, every day. But I'll give you some more specific ideas as things that you can do. And there are different groups that I'll break this out into. And these are the 4 groups that I'll talk about individually and what you can do to get the word out in these situations. So the different groups, family members and friends. So you'd think that would be easy, but many people get stuck in terms of reaching out to family members and friends. It's hard for them to get started. But try to write out your story, and not try to, I encourage you to write out your story, and I really do mean write it. It's been shown that when you write instead of type, you are saying things that you wouldn't normally say, or printing things that you wouldn't normally type out. It comes more from the heart. So I'll encourage you to write out your story, and then you can type it out so you can use it electronically. That's there. And I suggest that in your story, whatever you're distributing, you should include the donor coordinator at your transplant center. The reason for that is that the person may not want to speak to you yet. They may want to learn a little bit more about the process. So this gives them another opportunity to do that. And as I said earlier, include a photo in your presentation material. And in terms of locally, reach out to local media. You have a good story to tell. And if you get your story out there, obviously more people will see it if someone does write in the local newspaper, magazine, whatever. Schools that are there, children may have schools, or schools that you have attended, religious groups, reunions. There really is no limitation as to what you can do. And if you want to read stories, and I literally mean many stories a day about people either in need or are who have received the transplant, you can go to a service that Google has. It's called Alerts, where you would set up an account and you can type in keywords, living donation, kidney transplant. I still look at alerts every day. I get a dozen every day. I have PKD and other keywords that are in there. So you can get many, many stories. Using email and social media obviously is of great value these days. So using whatever arena you can. And I speak to people often and they say, I sent an email out or I made a Facebook posting. You need to constantly send out more emails and make more Facebook postings. It's much like the idea of seeing a McDonald's commercial or a Coca-Cola commercial. Do we really need to see another one? And the answer is yes. They think so because they want it top of mind. And you want the same thing. You want to continually provide information about your journey because maybe it'll click the second time or the third time or the fourth time. That some new information may touch someone either to get evaluated or to pass along that information to other people. I also have something on our website. It's called Tuesdays with Updates. If I was sending it out, or when I did send it out, it was Tuesdays with Harvey. So every Tuesday, I would send an email out, the subject line, it says Tuesdays with Harvey, and you could just send some additional information about yourself. Again, just to keep it in there. If you go to our website, you'll see over 100 ideas as to what you could send out on a weekly basis. And I encourage people to have a Facebook page and a website. On my website, you'll see examples of other websites. Facebook and a website, they do different things. Facebook gets information out there immediately to those who follow you. And on a website, you can have different areas where they can click on for more information. And there'll be, if you look at our website, I'll give there examples of what other people have done. So when you meet people every day, you really have to change your MO. Because what happens now, people say, hi, Harvey, how are you? Our immediate response is, okay, how are you? And we have to change that. People are giving us the floor. So when someone says, hey, how are you? Take that opportunity to tell them how you are, that you're in need of a kidney transplant. I call it my elevator speech. Have your 20, 30-second speech that is ready to tell your story that's out there. And it is an everyday experience. Even people you don't know will say, hi, how are you? So you need to really practice that. It's short-lived. We've all, at the end of the day, we bumped into someone we know, and we said, gee, we've got to tell them some information that we wanted to tell them. And the reason you forgot is it just wasn't top of mind. So this needs to be top of mind, because that opportunity to share that information with someone, it may be gone very, very quickly. And I do want you to practice. This is not the first time I've made this presentation, but I did practice a lot some years ago because it was nerve-wracking. It was very difficult to get the words out, even for this presentation. And it's, I understand, much more difficult to tell people about your situation. It's a most unusual situation. It's a health condition where you literally need someone to give of themselves to get the help that you need, whether it's a deceased donor kidney or a living donor kidney. So I talk about getting creative. I have two rules for being creative. One is you need to be comfortable with whatever you're doing, because people can see that it might not be coming from your heart in terms of what you're saying and what you're doing. And the other is it needs to be legal. So there's a whole opportunity out there. Here are some ideas of what you could, of things that you can do. You can print a business card. It was one that I used, and on the back side you can get out a fair amount of information. You can pause this and read this business card, and you can see how much information really you can get on there. Using car signs has become very popular, either on the back of the car or on the side of the car. That's there. When I talk about you need to be comfortable with what you're doing, I don't know if I'd be comfortable standing on the corner with a sign, but obviously there are many instances of people doing it, and men do it for their spouses also. This is a typical lawn sign that you would see for a political campaign. And although there's a lot of information here, what this person did is got a tremendous amount of attention because of the amount of signs they put in. Many local TV stations and print media picked up their story, and they got a lot of attention from it. T-shirts have become very popular. This is a gentleman, he wore this T-shirt, took it to concerts, and he walked around wearing the T-shirt. And when someone kind of said something to him, he would walk over to them, he would put his arm around them, and he'd say, take a selfie of us. It was printed on the front of his shirt, also the information. And he'd say, take a selfie and then share it with your friends on your Facebook page. It provided even more attention than that. And that's how he got his transplant. He was at a concert that he was at, and a woman there saw it. She went to the hospital, went to his website, went to the hospital, got evaluated, ended up being his donor. So these things really do happen. Maybe you happen to have seen this story. This was at Disneyland. It came out a few years ago. It went viral. It's my example is I have no explanation why certain things go viral, but this was seen by millions of people. He ended up getting a transplant from it, but that was certainly very unusual. People are using bulletin boards. The interesting thing about this photo or story, printed story about a bulletin board, is to show you that not only wearing a T-shirt or a bulletin board or a sign gives you attention, but many times a journalist puts up the story that provides additional exposure for your situation. There's an organization called Next Door, so you can stay in touch with your neighbors. This I thought was the most creative sign or idea that I had ever seen. So really wonderful for this individual. And get creative. I want you to do a search. Really do. Search Craigslist ad, I need a kidney transplant. And you won't believe how many people put ads on Craigslist. You'll see hundreds. You'll see thousands. Okay? So you can get creative and do many different things. You've had a similar experience in your life before, similar to pursuing a living donor, and that is job hunting. All of the things you did in searching for that job are very similar to what you need to do to have your donor find you. There are many people that, it takes 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months to start looking for employment again. And there's some people the same way in looking for, starting their kidney campaign. You need to really accept that and move on. Like in a job search, you research options, you learn about companies, and I want you to learn about the transplant experience. Write out your story. Networking is obviously very associated with having a successful search for a job, and telling your story is just like the job interview. You want to practice that also. So to give you an idea of telling your story, here's my story when I was first looking, when I was looking for another transplant. And someone would say, "Hey, Harvey, how are you?" And I'd say, "Gee, you may know that I had a kidney transplant a few years ago. What you may not know is I developed a virus, it attacked the kidney, and I need another kidney transplant. And I'm pursuing a living donor again. A kidney from a living donor lasts, on average, twice as long as one from a deceased donor, and I'm really trying to avoid being on dialysis." So I gave a little bit of information. You could do the same for your kidney campaign. So some other ideas, if you see something on a website or a tweet or something that someone has used, and you can search the internet for what other people are doing. You can take their idea and use it for your campaign. You can go to networking meetings where people are looking for employment. There's nothing wrong with that. No one's going to kick you out to tell your story about your need for a kidney transplant. I encourage people to volunteer. You meet new people when you volunteer. Also, people who give often receive. And fraternal groups, religious groups, they're great places to get the word out. Ask your religious leader to share your story with the congregation. And there are meetups. If you have hobbies, there are all kinds of hobbies that are out there. I suggest that you don't share your blood type or don't talk about blood type. Blood type is important. There's no question it's important. But many people don't know their blood type, and some people are mistaken. They think they're one blood type, they end up being another. That's not helpful. We talked about paired exchanges, and so a blood type can be overcome. And some centers do a blood type incompatible. They will transplant someone that's blood type not compatible. They use a process called plasmapheresis. You could look it up. Basically, it's cleansing of the blood in some way. So blood type important, yes, but not at the beginning of the process. So you'll find a link on the donor to donor website where you can get a copy of this presentation and some additional information that is there. So there are many transplants. I mean, over 18 living kidney transplants every day. And this is an old saying, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And that is the situation for you. So 3 important takeaways. 1, learn as much as you can about living donation. It'll help you feel comfortable in talking to people. Reach out to your family members and friends and encourage them to help you. Tell them you need them right now, and tell everyone about your situation. I firmly believe that your kidney is out there. They have not the person willing to donate just is unaware of your situation. So here are 2 contact points for that you can pursue. I want to thank Donor to Donor, Ned Brooks, for putting this, helping me with this presentation. I wish you the best in your journey. Bye-bye.